Hey guys, it's your host Julian. This week has been a long time coming. I'm talking to Megas XLR co-creator, Mr. Jody Schaeffer. In this episode, we're going to talk about the humble beginnings of Megas XLR, how the characters were fleshed out, some of our favorite memories, moments, and episodes, and then we get extremely personal towards the middle part of this podcast. We talk about the untimely cancellation of Megas XLR and the effect that had on Jody mentally. We both end up sharing some mental health struggles that I myself and then Jody has had, and then things that we've seen in other people. But all in all, this conversation was extremely fun. I'm so glad that this conversation finally happened. Like I said, I've been chasing Jody in a non-stalkerish way to get him on this podcast for roughly a year and a half, almost 2 years now. All right, a little bit more housekeeping before we roll into this episode. We're talking Patreon. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't yet, you should check us out on Patreon. We're offering 3 tiers with a lot of fun perks. Some of those perks included in these 3 tiers are a special shout out to all the patrons that sign up, question priority, early and ad-free access to the audio and video chats, voting on our upcoming retrospectives, and so much more. We're getting ready to release our next Patreon exclusive video at the end of this month. So if you want to see that video, we've already got one up there already, but if you want to see this one, you gotta sign up for those 2 bottom tiers. And speaking of shout outs, man, I'd like to give a shout out to Jacob, our first Patreon member. Thank you so much, Jacob, for joining us on this ride. Now, without further ado, let's get to this amazing chat with Megas XLR co-creator, Mr. Jody Schaeffer. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to What's My Head podcast. I'm your host, Julian. Today, I'm joined by Jody. Jody, welcome to the show, man.
Glad to be here.
Oh, man, I'm glad to have you. I know this has been a long time coming. We've been talking on and off for 2 years. Every time we get really close to talking, something in my life happens where I have to put this on the back burner. So I'm so glad that we're finally doing this, because if there was one constant in my life growing up, it was Megas XLR, one of my favorite shows of all time growing up. I would love to know the early stages, man. How does Megas XLR come to be?
Oh, well, that's I love that story. Basically, George Christic and I, the other co-creator, we were sitting around at my house in Somerset, New Jersey, playing PlayStation, and we're just, we were working at MTV at the time and just shooting the shit about what we would like to see on TV. And I mentioned to George, like, you know what I would like to see on TV? I've distilled it down to a single sentence: a big fat screaming idiot driving a giant robot. And yeah, like basically Chris Farley in a giant robot. He looked over, he's like, that's a great idea. We should, like, holy crap. We should, we're just sitting there playing games, and we just kind of snowballed from there. Like, he just bounced ideas off. I was like, oh, that's cool. Let's run with it. Like, he came up with the idea of the war in the future and sending them back in time. And then I was the one, like, yeah, he's really good at piloting the robot because he fixes it up. He's really good at playing video games. And it just snowballed from there.
Oh, that's so cool, man. Do you remember what game you guys might have been playing?
All of them.
Oh. I'm assuming you guys were roommates or friends growing up, and
we were friends. So we met in college, actually, is what happened. And then and then we all worked together at MTV Animation through Chris Prynoski, owner of Titmouse now. He actually got me my first job at MTV on the Beavis and Butthead movie.
Oh, that's really cool, man. What was it like those? Because I was born in '89, so I was at the generation, like, Daria was starting to, like, kind of phase in and phase out. Beavis and Butthead, I think, had kind of finished their run by the time I started really watching cartoons or anything that wasn't Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, anything like that. So MTV, we had Daria. That was starting to phase out, and I remember, like, the early Danny Antonucci things, and of course Mike Judge is one of my all-time heroes because of King of the Hill, nonetheless, man. I mean, it's just him, Greg Daniels, and everybody involved in that series was just phenomenal, man. But what were some of those early days at MTV like? Because I haven't had too many people that have had that MTV experience.
There's nothing else like it. It's indescribable. It was just such a weird counterculture creative atmosphere, it was just a bunch of East Coast weirdo artists getting together and just having fun. And I mean, like I said, my first job was on the Beavis and Butthead movie was during the hallucination scene when you see all the weird little rat fink imps. I designed a bunch of those, and like there would be that was the off Broadway, 33rd floor or something. But they would have like bicycle races in the hallways at some points. And at one point it was like, I think it was two people on a bike, and Chris P he saw that and he got his roller skates out. He just joined in, and it just people tooling around the halls on their whatever they had for wheels. And yeah, that's the sort of thing you couldn't do that today. You shouldn't do that. It was
sounds very punk rock, man. It sounds very reminiscent. It sounds very reminiscent. I've had a lot of the guys from the 90s as far as the Cartoon Network goes, so the early days of Cartoon Network, and a lot of them were saying the same thing. I don't know if you know him, but Andy Bialk, I had him on earlier this year, maybe late last year. He was a character designer for a lot of Powerpuff Girls, Samurai Jack, a few other shows. And he would say that they would go down and dress up with the old Hanna-Barbera suits that they would have and just walk the hallways or, play around and shit. And people would, I've heard stories of people coming up and down, riding their bikes, up and down the hallways, drawing on walls and shit. So it just sounds like a very fun, what creative people do when they get together. They create shit, man, whether it's mischief or art, man, they're creating something. I actually had a question. Somebody wrote in. I think it was on Reddit. I apologize, I didn't write this one down. But they had asked about that hallucination scene in Beavis and the Butthead. What do you remember from doing that scene? Is there anything that sticks out in particular?
Just the amount of freedom that they gave us when we were doing it. Like they said, Rob Zombie was the tentative director of it, but it was mostly Chris. And Rob signed off on stuff, and just stuff to remember. No, they were like, just draw us the most fucked up stuff you can, and we gave them some and then they would sift through and like, okay, we like this. I do remember some of the stuff we drew that I really liked that we didn't get, or maybe they did. I drew them as vultures at one point. I don't believe that actually made it into the final cut, and I thought that was a funny thing. So
yeah. Well, there you go, person from Reddit that wrote in. I apologize, I didn't write your name down. Flipping it back to Megas. Like I said, Megas was such a huge part. I remember it came in my life and it went out of my life very, very quickly, man.
I know the feeling.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that you really have to scratch your head, because I had told you before we hit record, I went and bought both seasons of it right before we got hit by the hurricane. No damage, but we just lost internet connectivity for a little bit, so I wasn't able to catch all the way back up on a show that I absolutely loved as a kid, man. But this one dropped my first year of high school, right? So I'm coming into high school for the first year.
Oh, you were exactly the demographic.
Oh, 100%. I was definitely a fat kid too. I mean, at some point in time, like I told you before, my dog just ate my last 3 Oreos, man. So I'm still a fat kid at heart. It's like I said, this one hit high school age, right? So I'm talking to absolutely nobody about this because all of my friends were too cool for cartoons. They were all into chicks or all into sports. You couldn't have all three of them, I guess. Growing up, I was one of the weird ones, I guess, just loving cartoons still, man. But I remember this one being so fun, from the voice cast to the art to the animation to just, it didn't feel like a Cartoon Network show at that time, right? So this is this is probably post Powerpuff Girls, post Dexter. Foster's is starting to come in. It really felt like a new wave of animation, like a new golden age, if you will, from that initial run from those original series for Cartoon Network coming in.
Weird you should mention, because we kind of weren't, we were basically an Adult Swim show before there was Adult Swim. If you look, Adult Swim came out like a year or so after we were already, after we were running on all cylinders. But had we come out a little bit later, no, we almost certainly would have just been in Adult Swim next to like Venture Brothers or something.
Hypothetically, and I like these type of questions. Hypothetically, if this show goes on Adult Swim, do you think you get a longer run than you did at Cartoon Network?
I mean, would get to do more of the jokes that we tried to do, certainly. Yeah. So there's a good chance, have more and more, and we have a lot more of those jokes because we're raunchy bunch of sons of bitches. But
Dude, it's so
one of my favorite jokes we wanted to do. Actually, I'll here's a little anecdote. One of the jokes I wanted to do that we couldn't get to do because it Cartoon Network was just one point. Coop or Jamie, one of them mentioned, like lighting fireworks off in the sewer or something like that. And it was just going to cut to them just doing the slow motion run down the hallway as the fireball was coming up behind them. And Cartoon Network said, guys, you can't show them blowing up a sewer. You just can't do that. And we're like, yeah, that's damn you and your entirely reasonable restriction there.
You guys fucking destroyed half of New Jersey every single episode. What's a
It,
sewer?
we it's a sewer is something kids can actually do. You can't like
Yeah,
kids can't blow up half a city on their own, but they could get some fireworks, take them down into the sewer, and start lighting them off. And that's
yeah.
it was emulatable. But basically, if we that's one of the reasons that the destruction was so over the top. If you're going to go large, because they can't copy it.
It is fucking wild, man. Getting back to that, I really like that. I would have loved to see. We do these retrospectives every once in a while. We haven't done one in a couple months because we've just been so busy. But one of the ones we did recently was on Toonami, and then Toonami kind of leads into Adult Swim, and I would love to see, since Adult Swim is actually starting to do that checkered past, which is excuse me, which is doing that the whole that first wave of those Cartoon Network shows. So the Ed and Eddies, the Powerpuff Girls are starting to do that. I'm really curious to see if they're going to do it with something like Megas or like Symbiotic Titan, with those two shows that were technically tax
Basically,
write-offs.
I would say, depending, like, if you would like to, if if you would like to see more Megas, tune into that stuff, because
Yes, absolutely.
they're going to gauge. That's one of the reasons that stuff is on there. It's like, how much interest is there for these old properties, and and I love all that stuff. I watch that. I watch Checkered Past unironically because I like those shows. Like
Oh,
we what's one of the reasons we pitched to Cartoon Network was because that was the network that got us, that got our sensibility. Like it wasn't as for kids as Nickelodeon, or as sweet as Disney. Like I said, at the time we pitched, their biggest show was three cute little girls punching a monkey.
yeah.
So we were like, that's our vibe.
I've got those three little girls right back there. I'm still trying to pick out a spot for Megas. I want to put them right behind Godzilla. I'm pretty sure you can see it, but the Hanna-Barbera version of Godzilla right there in the middle. I want to put Megas back there, kind of like what he's doing now, just throwing up the horns and
Oh yeah.
shit. So he will be back up there on that wall, man. So did you have, if Cartoon Network wouldn't have picked it up, did you guys have any other? I mean, obviously you've got the big three. I mean, MTV was kind of starting to fade out. I mean, MTV was fading out with any kind of animation or anything new that
Yeah.
wasn't reality TV shows. But was there a backup plan if Cartoon Network didn't go for it?
No, not really. I actually, the reason I pitched to Cartoon Network was because Linda Simensky, who was VP over there at the time,
Yes.
I think she's at PBS. I can't remember where she is,
No,
but
she's at She got out of PBS. She's at Duolingo now. She's
right,
a
right, right.
frequent guest. I absolutely love talking to her. She's such a cool
Tell her I
person.
said hi. She is awesome, and
Yes.
when I was going to college, I had her. She was a teacher of mine,
Mhm.
and I reached out to her with this pitch, and I was like, "Hey, do you remember me?" And she's like, "Jody, how could I forget you? You're the one that always fell asleep in my class." And I was like,
That's me.
well, yeah. In my defense, Linda, I was working full time at the same time so I could afford going to school. So I was averaging like 3 hours of sleep a night. So I was legitimately tired. I was not bored. And she laughed. She understood. But we set up a meeting at Comic Con, because we both love to go to Comic Con, and it was like not an actual meeting, but just we agreed to meet up. And we put together, George and Chris, we put together just a pitch video, like a concept thing, and we brought it in. And basically, when we got there, we just sandbagged her with it. Like, here, Linda, what do you think? And she dug it, and then we were on what was it, the cartoon voting thing, whatever that was. And we actually, as I recall, yeah, we blew everybody else out of the water. That was awesome. They and to be clear, like, as I recall, the other executives were not interested. Like, they did not want us. They're like, what are these idiots? Look at this. Like, again, it was crazy. It was pretty adult stuff, and they were still doing more kid stuff. But the kids just liked us, and we were kind of honored.
Dude, this show was so fun. This is one thing that has come up so many different times, and I try to stay away from the negativity because I just don't think there's any kind of value in it. It's just it's there's already so much
Agreed.
hate out there as it is, you know what I mean? So it's
Agreed.
like it's nothing's going to happen if I get on here and shit on something. However, try to be as polite as possible when it comes to executives, especially like I've heard so many war story or horror stories, excuse me, when it comes to the executive side. And I'm pretty sure it goes on the creative side too. There's probably some people out there that you've worked with that are absolute just assholes when it comes down to it. But, you know, I've heard so many people crush so many great shows, great series, shows to be on the executive side because they don't get it. And there's one in particular, obviously Megas is one of them. And the other one was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Everybody that came into to pitch Ninja Turtles, they go up to him and say, "Hey, we got this ideas for the show." No, this is fucking stupid. They're turtles, they're ninjas. Who's gonna watch this shit? Everybody
Oh, yeah.
said it. And then that toy line from Playmates blows up in '87 or
Oh,
'86, whatever it was.
oh, I was the
And
demographic for. I bought their comic. I had their first edition comics back in
I
the
mean,
day. Yeah,
they're
because
all over my arm. I'm going to the Orlando Comic Con tomorrow too. I've had Kevin Eastman on my podcast about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. Almost
nice.
cried on him. Yeah, so he's going to be here. All four of the original voice actors. I've had two out of the four. I had Rob and Townsend on. I haven't had Cam or Barry on yet. And then like the '90s movie, it was my introduction into pop culture. Like if I don't see that movie, I don't get into comic books. I don't get into cartoons. I mean, you can see my long box. You can see one of them over here. I've got another shelf over here of just nothing but comics, man. If it wasn't for the Turtles, I don't get into this shit. I probably don't even watch cartoons. So I've got a lot to thank that guy for him and Peter both coming up. And it's reminiscent. You and George are like the Cartoon Network version of Peter and Kevin, man. I mean, you guys both came together. You were making each other laugh. You said, "Let's make Chris Farley meets robots and let's pitch this as a series." I think that's fantastic.
I
But
do
going back
actually.
to
I was great. Oh, so I was gonna
oh
say
no no
I
go
hold
ahead
that
go ahead.
thought. I like. I actually credit the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with a lot. Like I said, I got their comics first run, and they were the ones that really showed me. It's like, oh, a concept doesn't have to follow traditional, channels. You can throw shit together and have fun with it. And just like you can do the spaghetti, throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks approach, and just if and you'll find stuff that you enjoy, and then you can lean into it. That's what I did. That's what they did.
Oh, absolutely, man. You really got to listen to your gut in some instances. Now, sticking on with the Turtles for just a second, man. One, do you still have your original run for that that first run from Kevin Eastman and
I
Peter?
have no idea where I've
No.
moved multiple times since. Yeah, no, I trust me. I am also like, God damn it, where did those go? Could have bought a house with them by now.
Dude, that first I had a chance of buying the first issue. It was graded, I think it was like a 7.5, and this is shit going back to like 2008, right when I graduate. I didn't have money, but I had a chance to buy it for I think like 6.5 or 7 grand, and I was like, man, I could either go to college or I could pull out a loan and buy this comic book. And I it sounds stupid. I mean, I joined the Navy, so they paid for my college anyways. But I was like, I really wish I would have pulled out that loan because now I look at it and for a 7.5, they're going for like $34,000. I mean, that's a huge jump up from just what 15, 16 years ago. So that's what 5 times the amount it was now or back then. So nothing but love for the Turtles, man. But
I got to be
going
honest.
back to
I'm more of a I'm more of an up approach to things. It's just a comic. That's like
yeah.
and you can get the pages and you can enjoy the stories, and that's what it's for, and that's what I have. So okay, you could have got it, but I think ultimately what I'm saying is I think you made the right choice.
I made the right choice because I would have broken the case because all of my toys are out of the box. I go in here and
Yeah.
I pose them, and I play with them. All of my comics, I read
Yep.
all of my comics. I don't buy digital. I've got the hardbacks for the original Peter and Kevin run. I'm not one of those guys that likes to keep shit behind a box or keep shit behind a case. I want to
Me
touch
too.
it.
100%.
There's something that is so special to me. And I told this story to one of the turtle guys that I just had on for the new turtle movie.
Great
Jack.
movie, by the way.
Oh, dude, it was so fucking great, man. Like if I think if this movie would have came out before the '90s one, like if I would have seen this one prior to the '90s movie, this would have been my favorite one. Dude, it is so close. Like I hold that first movie, that Jim Henson one that Steve Barron directed, that first movie in such high regard. I think it's a perfect movie. It's so grungy, it's so
I'm with
gritty,
you.
it's so dark. You know,
And
it's
it's a great
perfect.
message, and I
It
was like,
is.
it's a really touching message, and it stayed true to the comics most. I was like, you're
Yes.
right on every. It's for me. It's the Turtles movie. The new one is my second favorite Turtles movie, by the
Yes.
way. But then
Yes.
that one, my other like top tier favorite movie is Who Framed Roger Rabbit. That's actually the movie that convinced me to go into animation. I was like, that's for me. That is the perfect movie because it has everything I look for. It yeah, and again, same kind of thing as a big fat guy and a giant robot. Oh, let's do film noir, but with tunes. So
Absolutely. And I've gotten to talk to a couple people that have worked on that movie. It is damn near perfect. I'm not damn near perfect. Excuse me. It is a perfect movie. There's three. There's probably more than three movies, but there's three movies that come to mind that I think is absolute perfection. Obviously, that first Ninja Turtle movie. Who
yeah.
Framed Roger Rabbit is up there, and Back to the Future. Those are like the first three movies
Oh
that I
yeah.
think. The first one for sure.